It's a pleasure to meet you, Aidan.
Yeah, nice
Yes.
to meet you.
And I will get started right away. The slowdown in Chinese economy has directly impact on Korean market
Yeah.
and also Korean economy actually, and especially since China is the biggest export market. And how would the Korean economy be affected by the slowdown? How much do you think it would be?
Okay, statistically to speak is the total export in Korea GDP is occupying like around 60%. And export to China is around 25% of the total export. So when you plug in those two numbers, and you can calculate the contribution to the GDP, will be like this. For every 1% decline in Chinese GDP rate of growth, it will cost the Korean economic growth rate by 0.3%. But that number, I think, is not that need to be worried about, because government always do something to help the economy from when every time the economy slows down, they can prevent it from too fast. So it's easy to like rate cut or put some stimulus package. So I think that number is not nothing it's not really bad actually. Yeah.
Okay, should we move on to the bigger picture now?
All right.
And in terms of like during the third quarter, the Chinese economy actually grew 7.3%, and there are constant worries about the hard landing in China. And how do you assess the current situation, and what's your outlook on the growth level?
Okay, maybe it's better I quote the China government premier Li Keqiang's words. He say every time I told the public the economic growth can be reached like around 7.5%, maybe more or maybe less. So 7.3 is okay. So as you can see, the 7.3 in Chinese government is not a worry number. No. Okay. So based on our research, and we think the bottom line will be close to 7% in rate of growth of GDP. So we think we think the government will do something about the economy. And when we look at the Chinese economy, there is a very important phenomenon, and actually it's very interesting. The aggregate supply and aggregate demand in this economy, the aggregate demand may be a trouble, never be a trouble. The domestic demand is always very strong. The trouble always comes from aggregate supply. This economy is very easy to have some issue on oversupply or excess capacity, and most of the case is related to housing market, because the housing I think is still in bullish market.
Yes.
But of course, in recently they already slowed down. But the slowdown is not from economy itself. Most of the cases they from the government put some capital control on that market.
True.
So let's take example. When people want to buy the second house, in past 3 years, the answer is no. No. Yeah, there are a lot of restrictions on that. But the situation get changed since the end of last year, and to the moment like now, they already, they suspend those restrictions, and they simply let go. So we think the situation is not that bad,
Okay.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't say it's really, really good, but then, however, it's not as bad as people would think.
Yes, and we think China is not facing any kind of crisis right now. It's not a country is already in crisis. Yeah, everybody talk about China is potentially, they feel there will be a crisis coming from.
Which is not true.
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you. From our understanding, actually, the default has occurred for some of recent corporate bonds.
Yes.
And could you please tell us which industry or and credit rating the company that issued had, and also, if I can ask one more question, that what should investors be aware of in terms of investing in renminbi bonds?
Okay. One of the sources about those default rates is from some industry has trouble in oversupply, such as steel industry, company from steel industry and cement industries, and of course including like solar energy system.
Yes.
Yes, but the default rate is quite low. Actually, few company, compared to the whole economy, is still very few. Company has trouble in default, and in most of the cases, we look at the number is from interest part. It's not the whole thing.
No.
It's only up to the interest part.
Okay.
So compared to the rest of the world, I think the default rate is still remain low. And talk about the renminbi bond. I think investor can have confidence on that because it's not every company can be allowed to issue the renminbi bond. Only up to those company has high profit, high yield, and also the state-owned enterprise. So for those kind of company, I think people will feel safe.
Right.
Okay.
You just mentioned that it would be safe, but then let's get straight.
Yeah.
Which sectors or which, in terms of investing in Shanghai or Hong Kong market, what sector or stocks do you think it will be prominent for Korean investors? And can you explain a little bit further why you think that way?
I believe Korean investors are very familiar with high-tech stock, to buy and sell. So that will be the priority on the top of the list of recommendation. For example, the biotechnology, information technology, and also the high-tech equipment in the high-end manufacturing. That's also very good, for investors to look at. And one other thing is like the reform. Currently, it's happening to SOE, the state-owned enterprise. So in those industries, I think there has a chance for investors to look at. So such as the big banks, I think the banks will have some kind of progress because government already changed the policy attitude. Since the end of last year, they already moved the policy attitude from tightening policy to accommodative policy.
Okay. Any other particular things that Korean investors should be aware of or be careful with, and or maybe they should be cautious about things that when they're investing in the case of Shanghai or Hong Kong market?
Yes, I think because Chinese economy is very special in a way, like they are continuing to be led by CPC, Communist Party of China, and the country is still developing and also central planned. So the rule of game may be easily to change. So material in regulation is always the number one you have to take care of. So it's better way for an investor to do is you get some consultant like us. Okay, so you have to study a lot. When every time you go to a different country, I think the law, what kind of law they are you get involved in. So that's very important. Yeah.
Is it okay if I ask one more question?
Okay.
Well, like I heard that there is going to be a Marshall Plan in China. And any opinions that you can actually give to our investors in Korea? That how would Marshall Plan would be like prospective or in terms of like construction field, or as far as I know, it's a manufacturing or construction, or what else? Other sectors like aerospace, airplane field.
Okay. That's a trend right now in China very clearly. I would say the middle class growth. And according to the many research, people in middle class, they always concerned about healthcare, about the children education, about the mass transportation, about the fresh air. And safe food, safe food and security. So I think all kind of those industry are very good in invest.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. Thank you very much for your clear answer, and
Okay.
I appreciate your time.
Okay, thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay.
네, 수고하셨습니다.